Welcome to Just Minded My Business Media, LLC, where you get information that you can use. I'm your host, Ida Crawford, but before we dive in, subscribe to Just Minded My Business on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Share Just Minded My Business with your family, friends, and colleagues. Engage with us by leaving a review or comment. Your support keeps this podcast going and growing. Visit our website at jmmbmediallc.com to learn how we can support you in getting more visibility on your products and services. So grab a pen and paper and get ready for information that you can use. So today I'm honored to bring to you today Stephen Tyler, who has over 30 years of experience in product development in a wide range of sectors, from GovTech to energy to enterprise IT management. As Chief Product and Technology Officer, Stephen leads vision, strategy, development, and delivery for MotionPoint's product and technology platform. So welcome, Stephen. So I know you're going to tell us all about MotionPoint. So tell us what MotionPoint does exactly.
Yeah, so we do website localization and other translation services. So if you have companies that are growing up, obviously companies get to a point in their life cycle and their journey where they want to start moving beyond the initial primary markets that they probably started in and established their product bit in, and want to start moving into neighboring markets, other languages or other demographics within your current markets. Like if you want to start focusing on the Hispanic community more effectively in the US would be an example, or if you're expanding into Europe. And there comes a need to be able to get your whole of your customer-facing presence into the local language, but also into a way that feels right in that culture. So that adaptation is called localization, and we do that specifically for websites, which is a particularly challenging type of content to work with for that kind of thing. So that's what we do. We've been around 20 years and do that as a full service offering. We call it concierge, where we just do everything for you. Magic happens, as I like to say. And yeah, that's what we do, website localization, 20-year-old company. Very exciting times in this space, as with a lot of areas with all the stuff that's happening with AI and the like. So yeah, that's where we are.
Oh, okay. So website localization, that seems like that can be a very difficult task. Can you talk about some of the ways that you actually get that done?
Yeah, so it is more difficult than you'd think. And so maybe we start with why it's difficult, because with documents, and it's very easy to sort of pick up documents and say, hey, just go and send this to a translator and get it translated. But with websites, they're very dynamic, living, breathing things. And some of that content that needs to be translated is coming out of an organization's internal software development processes. Sometimes it's coming out of their marketing department. Sometimes it's showing up on that web page dynamically at runtime from some third-party supplier, and the organization has no idea what's going to be there until it actually shows up. So it's a difficult challenge, and we have a number of technologies that we've developed over the years to help with detecting the content that needs to be translated, getting it translated, and then exposing the translated experience. So that's what we do end to end. And we deploy, so we have ways of pulling that content out of wherever it may be with what's called connectors. But we also have a technology we call a proxy, which gets deployed and sits in front of your origin site. Let's say you've got an English website to start with. We deploy our proxy, and a proxy's job is to expose, let's say, for the sake of argument, the Spanish version of the site. And anytime a customer hits our proxy requesting a Spanish version of a page, we will provide that, and if we have the translations, we will provide it. If we don't, we'll go and get it translated, and that proxy goes and sees what's on the origin site and has it changed, and do I need to translate some stuff? So everything that's complicated about that is handled within that piece of technology. And then the other piece that's hard is sometimes you don't want to translate everything because some content is more important than others, and there is a cost to translation, and you want to put that spend in the most effective place for the most important, most productive content. So we have a lot of configuration that lets us control how much we spend and how far we go with localizing different parts of the website that may be more important or less important than others. And then the last area that's I would say is difficult is, again, when you're adapting for different countries, you don't necessarily want to actually just provide a translation of the same content. You may actually want materially different content for that culture, or maybe it's a product catalog where you don't offer those products in that country. So you have to do adaptation that is more than just translation, and we also deal with that problem. So that's why it's hard, but there's a lot of technology that we've developed over the years to try to deal with some of those problems.
Okay, so basically, it sounds like to me that you help website get into different demographics.
Correct.
Okay, so say I want my company to be, let's say, in Australia. I'm selling hair products, for example. Let's just use a scenario. I guess the company would be responsible for researching whether that product would sell in that particular region. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so obviously if the company's looking at a market expansion, there's a lot to that strategy. And the website is a piece of it, but it's a piece of a much bigger strategy of going into another market. But yeah, I mean, even it's actually a good example to take something like Australia or even England would be a good example. Obviously, I'm from England originally. In the content, it's English, but it still needs to be translated for those local market sensitivities. If you have images where you're trying to show, I want to, let's say I'm an online betting site and I want to have images of, maybe in the US, I put the Super Bowl as a background image, but as soon as I go to the UK or to Australia, and that makes no sense at all, and I've got to adapt it, even though I might use exactly the same words. So it's cultural sensitivities and cultural adaptation as well. That is, you've got to think through how well does the whole of the product travel, and what needs to adapt from the product and also from how you market the product and all of the content around that and the campaigns you run. So we help with that process. Obviously, another thing that's different about those locales, even if you're not going into different languages, is the whole issue of SEO, which is extremely important for marketing content and website content specifically. How do I make sure that I'm getting enough search traffic coming in and I'm being effective? And what you do in SEO is to optimize your content for certain keywords that are going to give you topical authority in a particular area on Google search. But those will be totally different keywords in those other markets, even if it's the same language, and obviously different if it's a different language. So yeah, all of those things come into the how do I localize the product and the marketing for a given market. Part of it's translation, but there's a lot of other things going on there, whether it's, what am I optimizing for SEO, or, what do I need to do to be culturally sensitive to the type of demographic that I'm now hitting, which may be quite different to home markets.
Okay, very interesting. So to keep it simple, it's like you have your original website in your local market, and then in the expansion mode, it's almost like having a duplicate website, but in a totally different for a totally different market.
Yeah, and in a simple case, it could just be the same content that's been translated.
Okay.
And in a more complicated case, it could be more significantly adapted for that market, as well as SEO optimized differently. And then the other vector of it is translation quality. So translation is not translation, it's not translation. There is a lot of, there are different technologies and they have different cost profiles with regards to whether you use things like Google Translate type of machine translation, or combining that with professional linguist services in various ways. So there's And obviously the different ways of doing the translation have different costs and different risk profiles to them. So there's an opportunity there again to just try to be thoughtful and optimize where do you spend to get the most return on that investment, and what's worth spending on premium translation and what's maybe not so much worth spending on the premium, and maybe you use machine translation in certain parts of the site that maybe they're not as high traffic, maybe they don't directly impact the key KPIs you're trying to drive as much as home pages or shopping cart flows might. So yeah.
Okay, so in terms of Google, okay, how would that work, or would it even work if you're doing a translation, let's say in Europe? How would that work with Google being able to translate your
Yeah.
website?
Yes, and actually, Google has their search algorithm would be very different in each language. So they're not just translating their search results. Their whole algorithm is working on in-language material. So you need to make sure your content is such that Google's algorithms will index it in a way that will cause it to be high in the search results in Germany, regardless of whether that would show up high in the US. And then the next level of problem is once you do get a link showing up on, let's say, the German Google search for, I don't know, whatever you're searching for, but there's going to be a link. And then the question is, where does that link go? Does it go back to the origin site version, or does it go to the German site version of that content? Because if you have if I've gone into Google and I've said, so I put in some kind of German query and I've got German search results and I click a link and it takes me to an English site, I have a very disjoint experience now. Mm-hmm. So that ability to support deep linking, so there's two sides of Google. One is how do I manipulate their algorithm to get my stuff to show up in their search results? And then those links that show up, how do I make sure they go to my translated experience and not to my origin site experience? So again, that's a technical problem, but one obviously that we solve with the approach we take to it.
This is so interesting. And how do you use AI to support your translations?
A number of ways. So it's interesting because obviously there's been this huge explosion around AI in the last year and a bit, where everybody now knows about ChatGPT and everything else. However, that technology that underlines large language models is the same technology that was brought out by Google around 2016 when they brought out neural machine translation, NMT, which is the current version of Google Translate, and it was a big step up from what came before. So in the translation industry, we've had machine translation that's using similar technologies to what's in these LLMs, like these transformer technologies, and using that to do translation at a very high quality, actually, really since, but getting on for 10 years now. 2016 was really when the big step happened there. So that's one way, in that there's AI in the core of machine translation, and the way the translation workflows mostly work now is that you either use machine translation on its own, you use some form of enhanced machine translation, and I'll come back to that in a minute, or you use machine translation that then gets reviewed and edited and tweaked by humans. That's kind of the way it works, but machine translation is core to pretty much all translation nowadays. So AI is there, very present. The next place AI is present, as I talked about, sort of enhanced machine translation, is what I mean by that is if I go to Google Translate, it does a very good job of translating things generically from one language to another, but it doesn't speak with the brand voice of Coca-Cola or Verizon or, or Abercrombie and Fitch. Which have a tone of voice, they have a glossary, they have terminology they use, they have terminology they avoid. Google Translate doesn't know any of that stuff. So sort of enhanced AI is where we train the AI to understand some of those things so that it can speak in what we call brand voice. So that's another area where we use the AI technologies to give an enhanced, better translation experience. And then there's sort of 3 or 4 other places, I won't detail them all, but where we use related technique, data science techniques to optimize processes. For instance, identifying where there's PII or personally identifiable information in content on some website that we shouldn't translate. So we have AI engines that will spot that, flag it, and make sure we don't translate it and we don't store it, and that we're compliant in our handling of that. There's lots of those sorts of use cases around the edges of the process where application of AI technology is meaningful.
Okay, so if companies want to work with you, how do they do so?
So biggest on MotionPoint.com. We have a website that explains what we do at a high level. And then obviously reach out to us and we'll engage around what level of service is appropriate. I mean, most companies, when they start to look at website translation and they want to take the first steps towards translating, you've really got two big choices in the world of vendors. One is to look at self-service solutions where you can go to vendors like that you'll find easily if you Google for them, that you can go in and sign up as you would with a SaaS product, and you get a translated website quickly. But it's also somewhat limited on how much you can do in it. And if you really want to deal with some of those more advanced problems that I talked about, it will be a lot of work on your side to do it. The alternative is to come to a company like us, where we essentially provide a fully managed service. And then so we'll engage with you about what that looks like and give you a quote for doing that so that you don't have to worry about a thing. We're just the easy button for you having a German website or you having a French website. So that's basically a choice of how you approach it. But yeah, all the information on how we do that is motionpoint.com.
Yes, and I basically, if I were to do something like that, I would want you to do it all.
You are a smart lady.
Because it sounds so involved. I'm already
Yeah.
got a headache thinking about everything I might have to do because, I mean, when a company comes to you, they really have to have done their homework in terms of the demographic they're trying to get into, and the culture. They have to do a whole bunch of that stuff before they even come to you to get it translated.
And generally speaking, that's the stuff that they should develop internally as a core
Yes.
competency. Whereas what we do is like, it's a very specialist niche skill that we have developed, and we can provide that more effectively and more competently than trying to do that in-house, generally speaking.
Right.
Because it is just a very hard thing to do. So yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, because I can't imagine just, Coca-Cola coming to you and say, translate this website for Germany. What kind of questions would your company have for somebody wanting to do this translation?
Yeah, so we would look at how big is your site, how complex, how much traffic, how much content, how easy is it to access that content before it goes live versus is it stuff we will have to pick up from the live website. So there's different technologies that we would apply to depending on the answers there. It would be a question of how much from your budget perspective, like how much do you want to spend on different parts of your website with regards to the translation cost? So we work with you about where does it make sense to spend more or less on expensive versus cheaper but good enough translation. Or maybe there's parts of your website that you just don't want to translate at all because it's just not worth it. So we would go through that. We would go through, are there places on your website where you actually do want to put a materially different experience in front of your Spanish customers versus your US English customers or your French Canadian customers? And so we want to do more transformation than just so we would translate, but then maybe particularly want to do more than translate in transforming from English to French. So we would go through all of that and then spec out for you what is an approach that would work, that we think would work for deploying and configuring our technology to meet those needs as cost effectively as we can.
Wow. So why should marketers use a website translation service? Just give them
Uh,
some benefits of it.
yeah. I mean, I mean, what we just talked about, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
hard. It's hard, and it's not something that you probably want to become an expert at because it's a big lift, and it's not something that makes your company better than your competitors. So I think coming and using a company like us who specialize in that and we just take care of that,
Mm-hmm.
and have you focus much more on what are my messages to that market? What is my content strategy for that market more broadly?
Mm-hmm.
What content do I want on my website for that market? And let us deal with all the technical difficulties of how do I actually make that happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what does your, okay, in terms of your structure, because this is definitely complex, I can already tell. So within your company, I'm sure you have different teams working on different pieces of the puzzle to make sure, and then everybody comes together and see how it flows.
Correct. Yeah, so we have services teams that do that specialize in obviously we have linguists that do translation. We have the translation engineers who manage the process of ensuring that translation gets done, and
Mhm.
also they do those people also do optimization of content. So you can that can is actually a big complicated topic, but there's a to keep it simple, we do a bunch of things when the content comes in off the website. We look at it and we do a bunch of optimization work to
Mhm.
try to make sure that we minimize the amount that actually has to be sent for translation. So it's a way in which we save cost is through this process of optimization. So there are people who do that. And then there are people who deal with configuration of our technology to implement whatever your set of decisions were to the questions I asked you earlier.
Mhm.
We have people who are running the technology platform. We have development teams building that. We have a QA group who do what they're doing is running tests against your translated websites to make sure that they are being properly translated, and that, let's say you added some new content, they'll make sure that we spot it and that it's picked up and it gets translated without you having to come and tell us, oh, by the way, there's some new content up there we need to translate. We'll spot that. So
Mhm.
we both have technology and some people that both look at that problem. Yeah, so broadly speaking, that's it. There's a few different groups in what we call our operations services delivery group there.
Mhm.
And then we have an R&D team that I run that builds the tech that all of that runs on.
Okay. Now, so do you have like a tech support just in case, let's say the customer tests out the website and something's broken? Do they
Yes.
have like a technical support team that they contact and
Yeah.
they say, well, I did this and this didn't look right to me.
Correct. So we do, and obviously from the point of view of what we're trying to do, being a offering a concierge service, we're trying to make sure that we spot those things and deal with them before you spot them.
Right.
But in the event that that doesn't happen, yes, we have a support team that will deal with that reactively and deal with those things as quickly as we can.
Oh, this is so interesting, Stephen. I'm just like,
It is an interesting it's a kind of mind-blowing thing when I've been around in technology for a lot of years, as you said in the intro, in a lot of different domains, but this is just one of those things that's got a lot of moving parts and it's way harder than most people think it is. So which makes it for tech people like me interesting.
yes,
So,
yes, yes. And I'm in the tech field. I've been in the tech field for like 30 years. I started when IBM with
oh
the big
wow.
mainframes and all that kind of stuff. And I've worked in a more support type capacity in the
Mhm.
technical realm of things. And this sounds mind blowing. It's just it sounds like it's a lot of work and a lot of precision work.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's interesting about this is that it's a very changing problem space.
Yes.
Not only because of, I mean, AI is obviously part of it, but also just even without AI, the frameworks and the way that people build websites is so rapidly changing and getting increasingly complex. Lots of very complicated like JavaScript frameworks that, without getting too technical, I think the best way to put it would be they sort of bury the content very deeply inside things that don't look like content. And so it becomes a bit of an archaeology game for you with technology to try and say, I see you, and pull that content out and know it needs to be translated. It's just much harder to actually see stuff when it's very highly obfuscated within some of the way these frameworks work. So yeah, it's an ever-changing set of problems to go after, and it keeps you on your toes, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And you already know technology is always evolving anyway.
Yeah.
I'm looking from the days when computers were big as rooms, and now we hold them in our hand.
My first job was working for the Treasury department in the UK, and we actually ran the payroll for all of the civil service public sector payroll, and that was run on a mainframe, ICL mainframe that was literally a room. I remember walking in there, we had punch girls that did all the programming. And it's amazing how far we've come from there till now in my relatively short professional life. It's the pace is kind of crazy when you put your head up and look back on it.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And I used to be one of them punch girls.
Oh, really? There you go.
For sure. I mean, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Wow, this is amazing. So again, if companies want to work with you, how do they reach out to you? How do they connect?
Yeah, just ping us on motionpoint.com. Contact information is there. There's contact forms on there you can fill in, and we'll reach back out to you, and we'd love to engage and have our folks talk to you about what we can do for you.
Yes, because you are definitely in a unique industry. I'm sure you don't have a lot of competition.
We have a little, but it's interesting that, as I said earlier, a lot of the competition is going more towards self-service, enabling you to kind of do website localization reasonably well, self-service, but that does hit a wall. So if you're a relatively small company with a very small website, that will probably work well. But once you get into the complexities of the major brands have, and a lot of our customer base is the major household brands that you will almost certainly be a customer of. And so for those folks, there's a different level of problem that needs to be addressed there, and that's where I think where we come in with the capability to address that with a very flexible set of tech and services offerings. But yeah.
Yes. So Stephen, this was definitely interesting to say the least. I know my listeners are going to be scratching their head at first, I'm sure. But you've explained this as simple as you could possibly explain it. And this was just interesting. That's all I gotta say. It was just really interesting. And
Good, I'm glad. Thank you.
Yes. And I appreciate you taking time out to meet with us and share this important information, because big brands are definitely going to need this, because it's too much. And the overhead and the dedication of the company's staff to work on this, it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, Mr. Stephen, it was a pleasure, and we've got to do this again. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate you sharing with our audience.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you to our guests and you, our valued audience, for stopping by. We truly appreciate you. Many blessings to you and yours.